Good morning, Jim.
Hi,
With Jim Peterson this morning, talking with our ACSM's Distinguished Leaders in Exercise Science and Sports Medicine series. And I've known Jim a long time, and I wanted to just start out, Jim, a little bit, if you could tell us about your early career, your early education, and then get into some of the things you've done, publishing and so forth, throughout your career, and then end by talking a little bit about the American College of Sports Medicine and your association with them over the years.
Well, I graduated from high school in '61. I went to Berkeley on a football scholarship where I rode crew and played at being an athlete. Graduated with a degree in finance in '66.
This is at Berkeley?
At UC Berkeley. And then during the days of rage, and I went to the University of Illinois as part of my I don't want to go to Vietnam right now program.
I remember that.
I earned a Ph.D. in what it then was called physical education, which is now they call it exercise science.
Who did you work with there, Jim?
Actually, I worked with my handball partner, who was a very good friend of mine. I was his first student, Reiner Martins.
Oh, really? Okay.
From part of my work there, and then I worked with King McChrystal and Dave Matthews for the last part of my work.
So what did you do?
After a few months with Reiner on my master's thesis, my dissertation was a piece of cake.
Yeah. And what did you do for your dissertation? Was it something in exercise physiology?
No, actually, it was in management and the process for planning large-scale recreation facilities. Because at the time, I worked in the campus recreation department at Illinois, while I made up all the classes that I did not take as an undergrad. Mm-hmm. Illinois was kind of an exciting place at the time because they had King McChrystal and they had some of the top exercise physiologists in the world there, right at that time, and I was getting used to it. Graduated in '71, and got accepted because I had a military obligation. I went to West Point in '71. Spent almost 20 years at West Point. I was in charge of the summer training. I was the only instructor who taught every student. The only semi-neat part of that was I can now say that I'm the only person in the world who taught Petraeus, the overall commander, plus Odenero, who runs Iraq, plus the gentleman who runs Afghanistan now.
So was this a fitness program type of thing in the summer that everybody had to take, or what?
Well, I was in charge of the summer training, but I taught during the school year. I taught my first 10 years. I taught boxing in the morning, and I taught the foundations program in fitness in the afternoon. My second 10 years there, I was in charge of the morning training, and then I taught lifetime sports in the afternoon, handball and golf and things like that. The summer training program is when they bring the new cadets in and they indoctrinate them in the ways of West Point and get them in shape for the coming year. And basically it's 1,500 kids show up on the 1st of July, and the very next morning they met me and the 57 or so Nazis that worked for me, and we introduced them to the joys of purposeful movement and showed them and got them into better shape than they might otherwise have been.
So it was sort of a basic training type.
It's a basic training. It's hello to the military, goodbye civilian indoctrination.
So every summer you were basically getting the incoming freshmen.
Right.
Okay.
West Point's pretty much a leadership laboratory. And so what happens is in the summertime, the cadets, the senior cadets, do the training, and then they're supervised by the faculty. So they divide into groups, and the faculty is in charge of various groups, and I was in charge of the faculties, so to speak, as part of the physical side. Mm-hmm. I was there at West Point from '71 to '90, and one of the real challenges at West Point is doing the physical things. During the summertime, realistically speaking, I probably had to run 6 days a week. I would run anywhere from 6 to 12 miles at a fairly good clip, and I was getting tired and worn down, and found it increasingly difficult to do that. And by then, a couple of years earlier, my brother had invented Stairmaster and started Stairmaster in the Washington area. And he invited me to come work for him. And I said, well, let's see, 3 times the pay, no running.
Big decision, right?
No running, plus I could escape the cold winters of the East. And my wife, who at the time was the fitness director for Pepsi-Cola, she thought that was a pretty cool idea, and we moved to Washington.
Was that were they in Woodinville then?
They were based. We all lived in Woodinville, and they had their offices right there in Kirkland, Redmond, Kirkland area.
Wow.
While I was at West Point, I've always liked to write, and I've always liked to be professionally active. And I had the opportunity about 1988 or so to meet Carl Stadefalt, who was a visiting professor at West Point, and he introduced me to ACSM and its mission and a lot of the people in ACSM, and I was duly impressed, as you would imagine. And when I went to work for my brother wanted Stairmaster to have a medical focus. He wanted to make sure that he wasn't nearly as concerned about the profits as he was about making sure that we had a really good, medically sound product. And part of my job there was to make sure that I coordinated and facilitated and initiated a lot of the research that examined the efficacy of the Stairmaster. And one of the things that I did at that time, because I was starting to become more involved with ACSM, was I got involved on the committee to write the standards and guidelines for health fitness facilities, because that was something that I had an interest in.
What was that, the early 90s then?
92. The first issue came out in 92, and we actually had Stairmaster underwrite the effort in it started in 91, and as it turned out, just because I was the designated guppy, I did 99% of the writing, and at the time, I was kind of the secretary writer part, and I was on a subcommittee with Steve Therrick, who at the time was running the Club Corporation of America's fitness side, and John McCarthy, the longtime executive director of IRSA. And John had been a...
What does IRSA stand for?
IRSA stands for the International Health Racket Sports Association.
Okay.
But basically what IRSA does is IRSA runs all the health clubs. They're the governing organization for the health clubs around the world.
Okay.
And John had been on the faculty at West Point as an assistant to the priest, and I had known him peripherally. So first edition came out in 92.
Was that with Human Kinetic?
Yes, all 3 editions have been
Which
with
is
him.
back to Reiner Martins.
Goes back to Reiner Martins. The kind of unique thing about Reiner Martins and Human Kinetics is the fact that he was sitting in my front room at West Point, because we had brought him there as a visiting lecturer. And essentially, we started we sat there and war gamed out how he could do Human Kinetics in my living room and what he was going to call it, and the entire 9 yards. Anyway, from that 92 effort, that led to any number of other volunteer projects on my part with ACSM, and I've just been involved since. I've been involved since about 91. I'm still involved with the health fitness facility standards.
Yeah.
We're working on the 4th edition right now.
Yeah. I want to come back to that, but I had one quick question. Early on, I was thinking that you were associated with Leisure Press.
Right.
Could you talk a little bit about
Sure.
that? Because I remember getting a book published by Leisure Press. It seemed like it was in the 70s to me. But
In the mid-1970s, I was writing articles and doing books for small publishers, and I had a fairly extensive involvement with the coaching community and some and some people in academia, and I decided to start an imprint called Leisure Press. And one of the books we published was a history of sport book.
That's
You were the one person who bought that book. Thank you. Anyway, I worked on Leisure Press, and we grew it to an imprint where we had around 100 titles. But it was being a faculty member and being a Leisure Press person, it essentially was a little bit more than I was capable of handling, frankly. And subsequently, I gave it to Reiner Martins, because Reiner Martins, with Human Kinetics, when they started off, they published, their first book was a book on they did proceedings back in the days when people actually did proceedings. They did a proceeding for their National Association of Sport Psychology and Education or something like that. And when I called Reiner and one day and said, basically, Reiner, this is not working for me personally, and I'm not doing the job I need to do for my authors. I'm willing to give you Leisure Press. And he folded Leisure Press into Human Kinetics, and Leisure Press became the trade side of Human Kinetics. And he actually ran it as Leisure Press for about 5 years. And at some point in the mid-'80s, he decided to make all of his books Human Kinetics, and he unfolded it, so to speak, and just made them all Human Kinetics. It worked out well for him. It worked out well for me, because I think the people that we had signed on as authors, they obviously got a good man, and it worked out fine, and they treated him well.
So you were involved with ACSM before you joined up with Stairmaster? As a member?
No, actually, I was in. Well, I was, but I take it back. I was involved with them slightly. I had just become involved with them in the late '80s. I had met Carl, and Carl had introduced me to ACSM. And to be honest with you, I had not. In my world, I came from PE, so my world was basically AFERD. And AFERD was more or less having difficulties at the time, because all of their academic focus groups were breaking off and starting to do
splintering groups.
That's right, and they were leaving, and they did not. They seemed to be more and more focused on serving the activity people at the elementary and middle school grades, and they were not serving the history of sport and the psychology of sport and all those groups. And Carl and I had these conversations, and he was telling me, he said, "Well, it's this group," and it was fascinating to me personally. So I had joined in the late. I had joined in the late '80s, and was attending the meetings. And when I went to Stairmaster, where my full-time job became sports medicine director for Stairmaster, then I became even more involved, because I had the time and I had the resources to do a number of things that I wanted to do on a volunteer basis for ACSM.
So the book that you were telling me about, with the health club people and so forth, is that the first book in that field?
Yes.
At that time?
At the time, just prior to when we...
Because this is for facilities, right?
Right, facilities. Yeah. What they were trying to do is they were trying to raise the expectations of standard of care and provide a legal document that basically said to the health club community that you need to adhere to certain things, certain minimal standards of care and expectations of care that guarantee that the exercise experience by people who join your club would not be compromised by whatever array of factors that would lead them, that would otherwise compromise it. So what that first group in '92, what that was it was in response to a request by Lyle McKaylee, who had been the past president of ACSM, who basically had identified that a need exists for some kind of baseline standards. And no one had done that, because no one had the gravitas of a ACSM to say, okay, well, we'll pull together a lot of different people and address the issues.
So that was part of ACSM, or that was the instigation for the book?
Right. It was.
So
it
was that an
Lyle's.
ACSM publication
Yes,
then?
yes.
So you worked with Mark Robertson?
Right. I work with Mark Robertson and the various people within ACSM. The actual editors of that book were Carl Foster and Neil Sull, and then I was considered the associate editor. As it worked out, I think what I brought to that particular project was I was a stakeholder in both communities. I understood where academia was coming from, but I also understood that someone needed to be there to apply some common sense to the process as it related to
The
the everyday world of clubs. And I think that's between Steve and I, Steve Therrett being probably the brightest person I've met in the health club industry, we worked well together, and because we were concerned about how the standards would turn out, and they would meet the needs of both groups, academia as well as the industry. We volunteered to write the book, and between the two of us, we wrote the entire book over about a 6-week period over Christmas in '91.
So when did the summit start then in relationship to that? A lot later? Were there other books in this line of that ACSM did between the summit and this?
No, not that I was involved in. ACSM, obviously, they do books all the time. The second edition of that particular book occurred in '98 in response to the fact that people had determined that the first writing group for that very first book was a group of about 30 people, which was weighted toward academia. And they basically were looking for a publication that could be aptly described as son of exercise testing and prescriptions. They wanted a lot of academia and a minimal amount of practice. And after we finished the original writing, they had basically edited the bejesus out of it and made it son of exercise testing and prescription. About 1995, someone in ACSM decided that, rightly so, that a need existed for a platform to address the practical applications of the science that ACSM is so rightly well known for. And they decided that the platform would be a once-a-year meeting called the Summit, and to support the Summit, or vice versa, the Summit could support the other one. The two projects were on the same track, which was to come out with the ACSM's Health and Fitness Journal, which would take the science and build a bridge between science and the real world of health and fitness. So they pulled together the group in the 95, 96 time frame. And we had our original meeting, and there was about a dozen of us under the leadership of Larry Golding, who was the perfect person to do this because he really is a stakeholder in both groups. He's a person who has the respect of both academia because he's been a long time researcher and instructor in academia, but he's also he's done a lot of volunteer work, particularly with the YMCA, so he understands the practical applications of the science, and he understands the need for making it relevant. So anyway, under his leadership, we met in Baltimore and we discussed how we would go forward with both the journal and the summit, and then the first summit was held in '97 in New Orleans.
And tell me a little bit, Jim, about what you're doing now in your Healthy Learning Company and Coach's Choice, and when did all that start? And you have a big presence at all the meetings.
Well, about 1997, I decided that I would like to develop an organization that would give a voice to people who had something to say but no otherwise way of delivering that information. That's right. Yeah. In '92, I I had attended a lecture by John Wooden, and John was speaking, and Coach Wooden was speaking at 9, and I was speaking at 10, and he spoke in front of 3,000 people, and then 2,997 of them got up and went to breakfast, and I was there speaking to 3 of them, and when I was listening to Coach Wooden, I thought to myself, wouldn't this be fantastic if people could hear Coach Wooden in his own words talk about this? And then I thought, well, I am not a technical person. I turn TV on, I think, but that's about it. I thought, well, hell, I could film some of these lectures by some of these really famous people. These are coaching lectures. What would be the problems? I said, well, I don't want to deal with agents, and I don't want to deal with money. I want to give the money away to somebody that, 1, makes me feel good about it, and 2, would bridge any misunderstandings between me and the coaches. So I nailed it down to kind of the 2 loves of my life, which were SPCA, which is animals, and the other one would be helping potentially terminally ill children, which is Make-A-Wish. And I interviewed both groups, and I finally decided on Make-A-Wish because Make-A-Wish gives almost 90% of the money to the actual kids, which is a very high percentage for a charity.
My daughter would be pleased. She works a lot with Make-A-Wish.
Right.
Yeah, so
And I filmed 2,000. I filmed 2,000 videos with Nick Saban and Tony Dungy and Bob Knight, and we've been giving money to the Make-A-Wish Foundation since '92. So anyway, after doing that for 4 or 5 years, a lot of coaches came up to me and said, well, those lecture videos are fine, but the production values aren't particularly good, which they weren't in those days because we were kind of going by the seat of our pants, and I didn't really know what I was doing at all. I didn't have some of the really good people that work for us now. So we started, I said, well, let me look into it, figured out how to make actual studio or on-the-field coaching videos, and then my wife and I are both exercise people. And my passion has always been, what can we do to get people involved in the benefits of exercise? How can we expose them to that? So at the time, I approached ACSM and suggested to them that we film some of the sessions at the summit, and that we would give them a fairly healthy royalty in return for being able to film it and then sell them. I said we wouldn't film anyone that didn't want to be filmed. And we started doing DVDs with them. And then as it turned out, we'd already started the process of publishing books in the coaching field, and it was kind of a logical next step that we would publish books in exercise science. Kind of grew out of that. I worked on I was on the planning committee and actually served on the summit committee for the first 13 years of the summit. I rotated off last year, so I've been doing that for a long time. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, I thought, well, it would be kind of cool and potentially valuable if we were able to say, and then in addition to doing what we were doing at the summit, because we were doing the keynotes and a few selected sessions, I said it would kind of be neat if we saved the named lectures from the national annual meeting. And we started filming those because I'm a firm believer that you learn from the people who've experienced what it is you want to know about.
Yeah.
And
some
of these people, some of these really terrific people in life, unfortunately, they pass on, and you've lost their insights and and the kinds of things that they have to share with people. Because as I've gotten older, there have been people past that I feel badly that younger people in our field have not had a chance to experience. They're just sitting down and talking to them. I don't think that the sales haven't been particularly good, but for posterity's sake, and I think that's the main reason, we have the name lectures from the last 6 annual meetings, and the number of sessions that we've been filming has grown exponentially.
Yeah.
And even though it's not particularly it's not a revenue neutral project, it's something that I enjoy doing, and it makes me feel like I'm making a contribution to not only to ACSM but to the field. And we've gotten to the point now where we make a pretty good annual contribution to ACSM through royalties from that program.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was looking at your tables out there. You really have a lot of titles.
Well, we film. We're the publisher for ACE. We're the publisher for URSA.
Okay.
We're the publisher for the NATA.
Okay.
We're the publisher for the American Camp Association.
I didn't
so we
know
do,
that. Okay.
So we do a lot of filming for them, and
I
then
see. Okay.
at least since the first time we filmed anything for ACSM was 1998. At least since 1998, we've kind of been the video filmer for ACSM. We have not published any books with them, although we have an arrangement where we do joint publications now with LW&W, and we have 4 or 5 projects somewhere in the mix with ACSM to start doing books with ACSM too. It's just another platform for ACSM to address the needs and interest of its membership, but we're going to do it through LW&W.
Well, back to the ACSM's Health and Fitness Journal. Right. You were, what, an associate editor, and you do a column in there. What is that, 4 times a year, 6 times a year?
It's 6 times a year on the journal. When we started off, I was the assistant editor-in-chief.
And who was the editor?
Larry Goldie.
Larry? Okay.
And again, a person for whom I have the utmost respect. And I served as his assistant editor and wrote the Take 10 column, which is the last
Which
page.
you're still doing.
Which I'm still doing for 14 years. I'm running out of ideas.
I wondered where you got all those ideas.
But I've been writing the Take 10 column for 14 years now, and when Larry rotated off being the editor, I rotated off being the assistant editor-in-chief because I thought Ed Hawley deserved to name his own team, so to speak. But I truly enjoy doing the Take 10 column, so I thought I'd continue to do that.
I look at that journal a lot, and it seems to me that it would be very, very useful to people in that field. That there's things that you can put out and put up on the wall, and everything seems to be explained in a way that members of a club could understand. And it seems to me it was a very successful, good idea, and I'm wondering if that is in fact the case. Is it?
Well, I thought it was
well
a great
received?
idea. I'd like to say it was my idea. It wasn't. It was. I think it was Larry's baby. But the whole focus was to take science and address it in terms that people could understand and relate to their own life. I remember when I first went to the University of Illinois for grad school after being a business major all my life, and they were talking, some fairly well-known instructors were there, and they were talking about science and concepts. And I can remember sitting in those classes thinking, the science sounds fine, but they have no idea what it really means. Mm-hmm. And I think what this particular effort was, and fortunately between Ed and Larry, they've been able to do that, which is address a variety of topics by people who understand the science, but also understand the application of the science, mm-hmm. and present it in a user-friendly form. And then, as you said, every issue also includes 4 or 5 things that can be Xeroxed and put up. And I think
that's a neat idea.
I think a lot of the people who work out with personal trainers or in clubs or whatever, they like this kind of information, mm-hmm. because it allows them to better understand how exercise is actually affecting them and mm-hmm. can affect them.
Yeah. One final question. Where do you see ACSM going in the future, particularly as it relates to the fitness side of thing and the summit? Do you think ACSM's on the right track? Do you think it's time for a change? Is this being well received? I don't know about the attendance, whether it's increasing at these summits, and the readership of the journal. Do you have any thoughts on where things are?
Well, you've known me for quite a while. I have a thought on everything, unfortunately. I think a sea change occurred in ACSM about 2 years ago under the direction of the president of the ACSM at the time, Bob Salas. And I think the initiative to focus on exercise as medicine. Exercise as medicine is the perfect tagline for what we do. You and I both know there are hundreds of benefits of exercise and physical activity, and I think that in itself is a perfect platform for saying, what does exercise do and how to make exercise relevant for people. The big problem in life is not that exercise is not good, but if exercise is so good, how can you explain the fact that 80% of the people in the country don't exercise? Right. Well, the only possible explanation is they don't understand it, they don't see its relevancy to them. And I think exercise as medicine can possibly go a long way in that area if they continue on and it works its way down through not only the research base of ACSM, but also the practical base of ACSM. And exercise as medicine is also another way for the college to reach out and establish the kind of collaborative relationships with other organizations in fitness, in medicine, that can help the college do a better job of identifying the issues that have to be addressed to make exercise relevant. As far as the summit goes, it gets better every year. I think the attendance has grown slightly, which is phenomenal given the economic times that we live in. The summit has, part of the reason it's grown and continues to grow is I think the college has started to place more emphasis on it. They realize that it is a good medium for reaching people. And as more resources have been made available, I mean, a perfect example is that for the first 10 years of the summit, we'd have our annual meeting at the summit and talk about next year's summit, and we didn't know where we were going to be. Now they have it scheduled out 3 years, I mean, which is terrific. The types of speakers they're getting continues to be even better than the years before. The sessions are well attended. The great reflection of what goes on at the summit is when the sessions are on, you can walk around my booth, which is a fairly popular booth because we have all those resources at Healthy Learning, the Acsm Store. You can walk around my booth, there's no one there. There's no one in the hallways. People want to attend sessions. And I go to a lot of professional meetings and conventions and clinics and things like that. And more often than not, the hallways are full, even though sessions are going on, because people are gibbering and they're jabbering and things like that. These people are here to learn, and I think the quality of what they do here continues to reinforce the whole idea that this is really a good educational event. It's run in a way that if you're attentive and you're interested, you're going to walk away from this. You're going to walk away benefiting. Yeah, that's right. It really is a learning vehicle for people. It is not show. It's done in a way that is very professional and very helpful to people.
I did forget one other thing, and you mentioned it, and that's the Acsm Store.
Right.
You have a lot of shirts and jackets and things with logo. Right. I see a lot of people wearing these things. When did that start, Jim? And
well, we approached ACSM a few years ago and said, given the fact that we've already done several hundred videos and DVDs for you, it would kind of be logical that we bring them all under one general website, point of purchase, where we would, you tell us the books that you'd like to have offered. We'll offer an array of books and educational materials from other publishers. And then a few years ago, I approached them and suggested to them that they had kind of a lower profile wearables effort run by, I'm sure, a well-intended woman who ran it out of her house in Indianapolis and said, well, in reality, you need both non-certified and certified wearables, and let's do a whole array of shirts and jackets and hats and T-shirts and the whole 9 yards, and we started that. Now, we've been coming to the summit in kind of a healthy learning capacity and the national meeting for a number of years and offering our products, but A couple of years ago, we suggested to them that they need to bring it under one umbrella, so to speak, and we would offer them, we would pay them a royalty, and they should view us as a service. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure people can come in one place and get some of the educational products that they need to do a better job. We are a resource center.
Well, I guess throughout the year, it's mainly people can buy stuff online.
Right.
And
They buy it online. We actually run two websites for ACSM, acsmstore.org or com or whatever it is, and then we run the Exercises Medicine Store, and that is gradually growing, and we're trying to find more medicine-related resources where people who are interested in the exercises medicine aspects of the physical activity can go. So we run both of those websites for ACSM. The store is doing fine, and the exercises medicine store is growing in scope, and I think in time it'll be a real good resource for people.
yeah. Well, thank you, Jim.
Well, thank you.
Time went fast.
It did.
Thanks so
Well,
much.
thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.